Welcome to Heathen Talk, episode 14. Tonight we're going to get a little bit beyond the basics on the concept of worth. Before we get into that, though, Lauren has some words of wisdom for you.
I don't know how wise this is, but however, I want to talk to you guys a minute about social media, specifically Heathen Talk social media. Now, if you're listening, you've probably already liked us on Facebook, which is, of course, facebook.com/Heathen Talk. However, if you go over to our page on liked, due to the way Facebook has changed things, if you'll go ahead and click that liked button where you've already liked us and scroll down a little bit, there's a thing called See First. And what I want you to do is click that. And what that's going to do is you're going to see Heathen Talk stuff when you log into Facebook. It won't get lost in Facebook's funky algorithm. You'll always see the latest from us when you log into Facebook. So you won't miss anything important because you really want to know what we think because we're doing it right. But, you can also connect with us on Twitter. You can go to our website, heathentalk.com. You can email us, contact us. We want to hear from you. We love hearing from listeners. We love hearing what you guys want to know. We love hearing your topic ideas, your toast ideas, and we also would love to see you in our stuff. So I feel like I'm pimping everything today, seriously. I feel like I need to also try to sell you guys a used car. But don't forget, we do have Heathen Talk shirts, and we now have Heathen Talk coffee mugs. So you can start your day with Heathen Talk and let the whole world know that you're doing it right. So you can get the t-shirts at teechip.com/Heathen Talk. And of course, the mugs are teechip.com/Heathen Talk mug. And both of those are available on our Facebook page. So come like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, send us email, harass us. We like talking to you guys. You can also message us via Facebook, or if you're listening live, go hop on our IRC channel. The link's on our Facebook page. You can talk with Lettuce, our lovely producer, and give him your questions for the show tonight.
And for those of you that did buy t-shirts, they should ship anytime now. Believe me, I'm waiting for mine as well, so you'll know as soon as we do.
I'm outfitting my entire tribe in them. We're gonna be at the Midwest Winter Nights moot, dressed in our finest Heathen Talk apparel.
Well, and, if y'all come to Cascadia Moot, you will get to see, at the very least, Torin and I in Heathen Talk shirts, and I will be drinking coffee out of a Heathen Talk mug there.
Well, Lauren's coming to Cascadia Moot as well.
I've already paid. I mean,
Yeah.
Who was the first person to support you guys on the GoFundMe? I'm sorry. Where do we have this up? I forgot.
Arkansas,
I don't know. But we're in Cascadia Moot also. If you want to come to Cascadia Moot, definitely check out. We've still got the fundraising campaign going, and we still need support to make it awesome. So I will be there. I'm going to be giving a workshop. We're going to be making awesome arts and crafts, so you should come just for that.
There will be beer.
There will be beer. Oh, yeah. There will be gluten-free beer.
Before we forget, if you want to show some love to the show, patreon.com/Heathen Talk. Not next week, but the week after, we will be giving shout-outs to those of you who have donated, and we really appreciate it. And again, by the 15th, those of you who have donated for the audio version of the Havamal will get the first installment of that. I want to make sure that it's produced well enough for me to stand behind.
And next week, Torin and Josh won't be here, because next week it is Girls' Night Out on Heathen Talk, and I have not one, not two, but three amazing guests. And stay tuned, and I'll let you know at the end of the show who that's going to be. Big names, huge. It's going to be awesome.
So, to the point that we're disappointed we're not going to be here.
Yeah, they're sad because I won't let them come play.
Way to be all, kicking the men's out. It's not cool.
Hey, we're gonna be talking about women's role in heathenry, and none of you are women, so.
Hey, check your privilege.
You are male identified. I don't want to hear it. However, Lettuce will be with us. Mark will be with us producing next week because I need him. So I don't want to find a substitute producer. So
that's fair.
Yeah. we've got, like I said, we have so much coming up, guys. I'm really proud of like everything we've done.
We do
I
have a lot
can't.
coming up.
I'm really
Um,
impressed with us.
it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
especially since we all do other stuff full time. I mean, that's
Yes, we do.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I run. Yeah, we work, and I run the Accessible Heathenry project. So yeah, we're busy people. So.
so tonight we're going to do things a little differently. We do have a tradition on the show of toasting someone who has done something for the heathen community. However, because of the recent events right down I-5 for me at Umpqua Community College, we thought it would be appropriate for this episode for the crew here and hopefully for you guys listening to take a moment of silence and respect the memory of those who had their lives taken from them at Umpqua Community College. So if you could just join us for a few minutes in quiet contemplation. So, again, you know, our hearts and minds go out to those who've been affected by that tragedy. And the entire crew here extends the greatest sympathies to the families of those that lost loved ones. And now on to less heavy things. So, Lauren, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking some fabulous coffee. It is a local roasted coffee. It is 100% Rwandan single origin roast. So it is my hipster coffee, and I really like it. And then I totally mess it up by adding half and half to it. So,
But you're drinking it out of a Hulk glass, so that's
I am. Yeah. I wanted you guys to be able to see that I was indeed drinking coffee tonight. So.
Well,
Torin, what are you drinking?
Me, I'm drinking a Cascadian brew tonight as, well, I usually end up drinking Cascadian brews because all the best beer comes from Cascadia. But tonight I'm drinking Bridgeport's Stumptown Tart. It's a raspberry ale. It's every bit as girly as it sounds, but that doesn't mean it's not delicious.
I can respect a man who drinks a girly drink.
I mean, come on. I mean, look at that color. It's
the
blush. It's the blush of the beer world. It's
the raspberry lambic is fantastic.
The Lindemans, yeah, that stuff's great.
That I have. My friends are all big fans of that. Unfortunately, I have berry allergies, so in addition to everything else I'm allergic to, so I've never had lambic. I would like to have it.
Between the gluten and the berries, you'd be toast.
Yeah, pretty much. So I normally stick to my hard ciders and my box wine.
Well, tonight, I'm drinking one of my top fives. It's Cascadian Brew, as I usually end up drinking. It's the Fort George Cavatica Stout, and it is quite delicious. And as long as you don't have a gluten allergy, you should go buy some right now.
You should buy a whole bunch of it. It's delicious.
Indeed.
And if you're in more of the southern region, I would encourage you to go buy, because my favorite one it was Diamond Bear, which of course is the pride of Little Rock, our Diamond Bear Brewery. I liked their IPA, sue me, but that's my favorite, or was, before all this whole gluten stuff started.
Hey, you know what? As often as I insult IPAs, I will say that there's two brews down right now between me and my brother Joe, and one of them is an Imperial IPA, and I have sampled it at its first rack, and it's actually going to be good.
I'm going to remain skeptical.
I will make sure a bottle gets reserved for you if it comes out the way it seems like it's going to.
I will look forward to drinking it. So speaking of beer, let's talk about worth. You like that segue? That was fantastic.
That was worthy of like your own talk show, dude.
You know, honestly, I thought you were going to make a segue with a pun about worthy brewing, but
it was in my brain, but I've had a headache all day, so it just didn't happen. This is a subject that sometimes catches us quite a bit of grief from other aspects of other aspects of the overculture in general. When you start assigning worth to people, it puts some people in an odd headspace. They seem to think that you are devaluing humans by saying that someone has greater worth than another person.
well, you know, there's a really big push in, you know, the modern overculture to, you know, say that you know, everybody is as equally valuable as the next person. Everybody has the same amount of worth to go around, and it's going to be really awkward for us to explain that we're not trying to say that, you know, some people are just straight up worthless, when what we're trying to say is that there are going to be some people that are straight up worthless. But
Well, and there's also the fact that my worth to my husband is going to be different than my worth to somebody who needs a crossing guard.
Yeah.
Because I'm blind. For those of you who don't watch regularly, I'm blind.
I do think that
I've rendered Torian speechless there for a minute. Oh, okay.
that was magical.
It was. Maybe it's the t-shirt that said Lauren is magic.
So, when we talk about worthless or having worth, and the differences of worth, are we talking about specifically the value of an individual as a human, or is there something else there that the overculture fails to see when we're talking about this?
I would say that there's definitely something the overculture fails to see about it. Is the overculture tends to treat worth as an intrinsic value of life. And worth is not so much an intrinsic value of life as it is a social construct by which humans, by which we value each other for what we can contribute, if that made sense.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we have to always realize is that I know you have said in the beginning that, you know, there are some people who are worthless, but I think that most people have some worth in some way or another. I think, you know, and that's not to be a Havamal beater, but, you know, that to me, and maybe it is because of my own personal situation, you know, the lame can ride a horse. You know, the fact that there is worth no matter what kind of like physical shortcomings or disabilities you might have, which can be kind of challenging. I think heathenry actually empowered me when it came to this, as opposed to kind of the older culture when I started going blind.
Well, absolutely, but that's where you get into the difference between, you know, intrinsic and earned.
Right.
You know, your worth as a human being, if it were to be judged on things, but like you being blind or somebody who's, you know, lost their legs or something like that, that is intrinsic. That
Right.
is something that is an uncontrollable quality of the person. And you can't judge somebody based on that. However, you can start judging worth based on what they do despite that.
Exactly. And that's, to me, that's the difference of seeing myself as I'm going through this. And I'm getting a little personal here, don't care. I get a lot from people, how are you able to, you know, go back to school and do all of this? And I just could never have done that. And to me, that's just what it do. That's just what you do for the betterment of your tribe. And so it can be a little weird for people who aren't heathen to understand that there is worth in hard work. There's worth in all of those things.
Right.
Well, so okay, let's take just a half a step back here. How we've established that there is worth in some actions, and that most people have a base level of worth. How does one build their worth? Torrin, you're putting together your tribe group there. How does a person within your tribe build and maintain their worth to your tribe?
Well, in my tribe, all people start out worthless. That is that their worth is yet to be established to the tribe. There are no preconceived expectations of worth from a person, and by doing that, you give them the opportunity to show their worth through learning and contributing, through being able to understand the ways of the tribe, to be able to understand the ways of heathenry, and to be able to show that they can contribute to the tribe, to the community at large, and to the land that we live on. So I guess the first step would be in knowledge as you build it and what you have. And then beyond that, there are the things that you can contribute, be they financial help if that happens to be where your abilities lie, or physical help through building, through defending, through what you can do for the community, where really we find ecological conservation in this area to be extremely important to us. So it's things like that, and ultimately you come back to the ultimate determiner of worth, which is the tribe itself. When the tribe decides you have worth is when you have it.
So, Lauren,
Yes.
I know you're a member of a kindred, and within that group, do you guys have any worth-building traditions? For instance, do new members intrinsically have worth, or do they have to earn worth within the tribe? What's the process for you guys?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. We haven't had a new member since we formed. We are incredibly small, and so, however, we have removed a member because of his worth, because he was engaging in actions that ran contradictory to the kind of luck we wanted to build. I mean, I'm not, when I say we're small, there's 3 of us, and we call ourselves quasi-active at the moment. We're trying, but it's very hard when 2 of the 3 members have a 4-year-old. So, but really, I mean, that's something that we need to discuss, and definitely, because we are hoping at one point to open up to new members, but at this point, it's not something that we generally have discussed, just because we've not been terribly open to wanting to invite people after going through the situation where we had to remove someone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was difficult.
Well, that brings up an interesting topic of discussion here.
Yeah.
The point of these episodes is to go beyond the basics. So I'm going to pitch an idea that I've seen kicked around many forums, and one that I kind of see the logic behind. This is going to get a little historical for those of you who aren't into the whole Reconstruction thing. Sorry, but you're going to have to put up with it. The idea is that when it came to bog sacrifices of prisoners, oftentimes they were prisoners of war or otherwise shunned from the community. It was actually a way to cause someone who was without worth to have worth for the community by being a communal sacrifice. Is that how does that parse to a modern day life? Obviously, we can't go and throw a convicted whatever into a bog just because we want him to have some worth again. But how can we take a principle such as giving a prisoner of war or someone who is without any worth due to their own actions? How can we go about giving them the ability to regain worth?
Some people are just put on this earth to be an example of what not to do. And therefore they have some worth in simply by being an example of what not to do.
I would argue there's no worth in that.
No, I'm just basically being sarcastic. No, I don't know, because
well,
I've
first
seen
let's establish
some of
does that sound like a plausible idea behind bog sacrifices. Toby would probably have a ton of opinion on this one, but unfortunately he's not on the episode, and I don't even see him in the chat room. So,
well, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
I can see where that would be idea. I mean, just looking at it from what I know, which granted I am not a scholar by any means, like many of you are. So, but logically, you have someone who, especially if it's somebody you are keeping prisoner, if you're having to keep this person alive, it's actually costing you. It's costing the community. So it would make sense to me then that you could make that person's death of worth. Maybe not even necessarily that person, but certainly that person's death.
So I would argue that while that may or may not have been a function that our ancestors could deal with, that is not something that we can in the modern day. Because that sort of sacrifice implies ownership. And in fact, the idea of worth as a whole implies some sort of ownership or common membership. My tribe's people belong to the tribe, and therefore the tribe can determine their worth. But we don't get to determine the worth of others because they don't belong to us. We can have our own. That's where you get into the difference of worth and reputation. For those of you that listened last week, but in this case, those are the two things you have to deal with. So if we can't, own the prisoner to sacrifice them, then we can't assign worth.
But if you're looking at a purely pre-Christian or arch-heathen, would they have not, from the way I understood it, would they have not, in essence, owned captives, owned that kind of thing?
They
I
would
mean,
have.
that's
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I mean, barring what may or may not have been a thing for our ancestors, I'm saying it has that concept doesn't really hold water in the modern day because we don't have a social mechanism for it.
So unless, of course, it is someone who is in your tribe.
Right.
And even then, I would argue that due to the way our society is set up, and I would say rightly so, I think that doing away with things like slavery and ownership of other peoples was a good thing.
Yeah.
Due to the way that's set up, we cannot forcibly redeem someone's worth to take something brutal and
honest.
make it fluffy.
I don't want to see somebody bogged because those are perfectly nice bogs. What did they ever deserve?
Well, and I will say that we do something today with prisoners that was not as common in our ancestors' days. We give those prisoners the opportunity oftentimes to reclaim their own worth. And thus we give ourselves the opportunity to increase our own in a manner of speaking. But, we do offer those sorts of opportunities for people. So it, in some ways, is the same, except for we're doing it without giving much benefit to our own tribe, aside from the obvious part of possibly putting a worthwhile human being back into the population instead of an utter piece of garbage.
Well, I think it's interesting how, if you look at cultures like Sweden and Norway, how they treat their prisoners versus how we in America treat our prisoners, there is more of a focus of, I would say, regaining worth. There's more of a focus on rehabilitation versus in America where it's much more about just warehousing and punishment.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting thing. For me, someone within my own who we released from ours, to be completely honest, there's no regaining his worth with us. He did things that we deemed basically unforgivable, and with good reason. And it was a consensus decision. And there's some people that don't deserve that second chance. There are some things that you can do that are not worth giving someone a second chance, especially when you've given them a second chance.
Well, and that's another thing is part of the overculture that we live in, and I've seen it kicked around once or twice on the subreddit, and every once in a while it comes up on Facebook, is this idea of forgiving someone. What does heathenry say about forgiveness? And the often unpopular answer that I give is nothing. We don't forgive. You redeem yourself, or you don't. That's up to you.
I will forgive if it's what's in the... I think forgiveness has a place only when it comes to if it's best to let it go for the sake of the family, especially when you have a majority Christian family members. But that's more of the number one rule of heathenry, what's good for the tribe is good. Sometimes I just got to let it go.
Well, sometimes you have to operate within the constraints of the culture you're in.
Exactly.
And we have our own ways of, justifying that to ourselves, doing it for the good of the tribe or whatnot. But, and sometimes, it's not so much forgiving as it is to give the appearance of forgiving.
Or just stop caring.
And like Josh was saying, this topic comes up on Reddit or on Facebook or, in person or wherever, the idea of forgiveness. But I'm sorry. Anyways, the idea of forgiveness comes up, and I would say that if you wanted to give somebody an idea to get their brain to start wrapping around the ideas of the heathen thought process, it would be that for us, forgiveness would be equal to acknowledging a debt having been paid. The person who you would be forgiving has incurred a debt to you, and if they paid that debt, you can acknowledge that debt has been paid, and therefore use that as the language in place of the word forgiveness, if that makes sense.
Interesting, and kind of a slight tangent here, but I find it interesting that, yeah, I know, right? I find it interesting that is really kind of the basis of 12-step programs, is making amends. It's not about asking for forgiveness, it's about making amends for the things that you have done. There is no step that says you asked for forgiveness. There is a step that says you make amends for all the horrible things you did as an addict. And I find that for something that's supposed to be very quote-unquote Judeo-Christian, which in my experience it hasn't really been, I just find it interesting that that's much more heathen worldview than a Christian one.
Right.
I don't know much about 12 steps, so I couldn't speak to that. I do know that a lot of the world, and I've used this phrase before, but the old ways died hard, and they changed the world as they died. And so when Christianity came up against the elder heathens, Christianity changed. It wasn't going to be successful unless it changed. And so a lot of the stuff we pick out that seems to be already heathen in our overculture comes from that period of time.
Yeah.
Definitely. And like I said, that's kind of even been my argument with people who I have fundamental disagreements with about who can be a heathen is if you grew up in Europe or the Americas, pretty much you are heavily influenced by that culture just because our overculture is so influenced by it. But, you know.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and derail us a little bit here.
Okay.
And take a question from the IRC. Etheric asks, how does one's worth affect their ability to impact or give or acknowledge worth in others? I'm sorry, the way that question was written down, it's a little bit awkward to say it out loud, but I completely understand what he was getting at. How does your own worth affect your ability to assign worth?
Okay, so I'm gonna give an example. My worth, because this is something that's actually happened. So Toby knows me. He is assigned a worth to me, for lack of a better way to put this. And because I am able to say, yes, this person, or we've done this before tons of times, this person is a good person. I vouch for them. I am able to, in their eyes, assign worth to them from what I can assign to them and say, yes, this is a good person. This is someone I trust. This is someone I would ask to call me to bail me out of jail, or And I think I think that. But if you don't know me from Adam, and you don't think, or you do, and you think I'm a crappy person, I have no worth to you. What I say doesn't mean a hill of beans.
Okay, Josh, let's see if you're going to say exactly what I want to say.
Oh, come on.
I think what you're talking about there is reputation, not worth. And
yeah,
the reason I say that,
I do get those confused,
is because reputation strictly deals with the way you interact with others. Typically in an extra tribal situation, you have a reputation with the people you trade with. You have a reputation with the people you work with, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you're right.
Whereas
I'm wrong.
Within a tribal
I'm getting
sense,
it backwards.
within a tribal sense, I have worth to my tribe, and thus I have the ability to tell my tribe, or at least seek consensus within my tribe to validate someone else's worth to the tribe. So if we have a probationary member and I think they've done enough to earn worth, I can then stand up and say this person has worth, and the rest of the tribe can agree or disagree on that, but they can't come in and say I have worth because they don't have any yet. You can't have worth until you're given worth by someone with worth.
Right. I was going to say, and Josh, you got it in one there. Worth is something given by the family, the tribe, the community, however it is in your particular place that that close grouping is determined. Whereas reputation is something that is how your worth is translated to the outside world, I guess is one way of putting it. So.
And see, this is even me, who's been a heathen for bootleg of years, gets things wrong. And I'm doing it wrong in that particular instance.
Well, and honestly, it's no coincidence, as much as it is, that we followed the reputation episode with an episode on worth, because these are very closely related concepts, and they're easily confused concepts. And some would probably look at the idea and question whether or not these two things really need to be separate concepts, or if maybe their separateness can be just mentioned and moved on from. But when it comes down to it, I don't think that they can be.
So maybe then let me toss out another example here, see if I'm on the right track, because I do think better a little more practically. So I have worth with my family. And I come to my family and say, before I married my husband, hey, I want to marry my husband. So I am bringing my husband into that family, into that tribe. And because I have worth with my family, me saying, hey, I want to bring this person and he is a good person, let's pretend like I have worth as far as picking men, because before my husband I didn't have any, but let's just pretend. Then my family's going to say, well, he must, because she says he's a good person, he will be a good person for our family. On a very basic level.
Well, I'd say that, in a very basic level, that's basically how it operates. Your worth within your tribe determines how, I guess, heavily weighted your word is.
Yeah.
If you say something is and you are a person of high worth within your tribe, then that thing is. If you say you're going to do something, then there is no question about whether or not you're going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas, your worth may not be as high, and people might question you on that. People might question your ability to make those judgments. People might question your ability to perform the task you say you're going to perform, et cetera, et cetera. But all of that is a function within the group.
Right. And that, the opposite is true. I mean, I had not always had the best choice in men, even heathen men. And so when I came home and said, Jesse's awesome, I'm going to marry him, my family was a little skeptical. So I had to rebuild that worth.
But it worked out in the end.
But it worked out, and now they actually trust my judgment on this kind of thing.
So
Not that I'm bringing anybody else home ever again, but
right.
So the basic answer to the question here is you can't acknowledge or give worth without worth. That's just kind of the way it is.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like you don't pick somebody to teach a class in a subject they're completely uneducated in.
You don't ask Lauren to be the crossing guard.
And that brings up between that and you mentioning your past failures at picking decent men before your current husband. I say current husband. I don't know if there's been any others before him.
There was. I was married to a heathen man for a while.
Oh, that's right. You have told me that before, and I just completely forgot about it for a moment. So you obviously have shown issues with that, with that kind of judgment in the past. But I'm sure that there are other things that if you had said something to your family about, they would have trusted you without even questioning.
Oh, yeah. Anything to do with computers or rocks, geology.
Here's an important distinction. When we're talking about something specific, when it comes to, for instance, one's ability to pick a suitable person to share their life with, or someone's ability to fix a computer, someone's ability to braid their beard, I'm not convinced that those are functions of worth. Those are functions of reputation. Intra-tribal reputation. Your worth, however, is built on a combination of your utility and your reputation. So you can't have worth without a reputation, but without a usefulness to the tribe, to the family, whatever, that reputation is standing on its own and doesn't have anything behind it. Your worth backs up your reputation.
But I would disagree with you. You talked about utility, but when you are talking about those specific type topics, I have a worth to my mother. I have a utility to my mother because she can never remember her Wi-Fi password. So she knows it can be 2 o'clock in the morning, she'll call me and wake me up, and I'll always answer the phone, and I'll always tell her what her Wi-Fi password is, and I'll always tell her that it's on her text messages. But, I mean, that to me is very much
that's a specific utility.
Right, but I mean, that's the thing. My mom knows that if she has problems with something like that she can't handle with technology that's beyond her, she knows that I will always fix it for her. She knows I will always be there, and and I guess that's where you and I are kind of diverging, because I feel like the way you're specifying reputation and utility is where you're losing me on, because that's the way I'm understanding what you're saying. but you're kind of losing me on it.
Well, one could almost say that the worth is the ability and the reputation is the follow-through.
That's a perfect way to say it. It's your worth. For instance, I know that if Torrin says he's going to brew me a 6-gallon batch of a chocolate stout, I know not only will he do that, but he has the ability to do it well.
Thank you.
I've tasted your beer. It's quite delicious. Now, by the same token, if I tell Torrin I'm going to brew him a gallon batch of, because I live in a small apartment and I only have gallon jugs, it's a whole thing. If I tell him I'm going to brew him a gallon batch of mead, then he may know that by reputation I'm going to have a gallon batch for him next time he sees me. But he doesn't know if it's going to be good or not. And considering my last batch of apple cider turned into vinegar, I don't know if it's going to be any good or not.
See, this is true. I know he would do it. I just can't guarantee that it would be worth drinking.
Whereas I've never brewed on my own, and I told you guys about my plans to make redneck mead, and so yeah, you guys will know I'll do it, but none of you are going to want to touch it.
So, this kind of conversation, since I can speak for at least Josh in this conversation, I'm not sure about Lauren, that we're kind of taking this entire topic by, this is something that we've been thinking about for years and years and years and years, which is why, in certain parts the conversation has sounded a little bit awkward, is because when something does become so ingrained in your psyche, sometimes it becomes difficult to articulate it. But I wanted to point out the language issue here.
Yeah.
Just in my reply to Josh a moment ago, I said that I know that he'll do it, but I don't know if that mead will be worth drinking. So the worth is the quality. It's the reputation is the product itself. The worth is the quality. By reputation, I know that the mead will come, but I don't know if it'll be if the quality will be high enough to make it worth drinking, if that makes sense. Just to give people another way of thinking about it.
And see, I guess that's where because those concepts, for my particular, I guess now the more we're talking about it, for my particular heathen upbringing and kind of how things run around here, I don't know that those two topics really are that separate, and part of that is because we have, there is a worth in an evangelical Christian point of view, which is very much what heavily influences here, can mean things that are so drastically different. I guess to me, worth and reputation do kind of have always been kind of meshed together. So it's interesting to have that idea challenged for me, just because it's just something that I don't know I ever truly took apart.
So Torrin and I both hail from what, well, once you get in within any sort of city limits, is a liberal bastion. And when it comes to that, we end up seeing challenges to worth based on a different ideology. For instance, I recently had someone challenge me on worth here because when I said straight up they didn't have any worth within my group, my tribe, they assumed I meant they had no value as a human being, which isn't the case. Obviously, they have value as a human being because they're a human being. But for us, that challenge comes from a different mindset, a different worldview, which is a term I try not to use very often.
And see, that I think becomes an issue with a lot of words that we use in heathenry, is that you're going to have situations, and not just with new heathens, but old heathens, depending on where they are in the country. I mean, one thing that we've discussed before is, regional variance, even in the fact that some areas of the country are still kind of still in first generation heathenry, some aren't. And, to some people that I have experience with here, and probably even almost everywhere, your worth is dependent on how well you adhere to the 9 noble virtues, which is another show we did, episode 9. It's up in the archives. Go listen to it. And so that, I think that isn't, but at the same time, I could totally get the whole special snowflake. I'm not, I say you don't have worth to my group. Well, you must think I'm not a good person and you must validate my existence. Yeah, I could see that here too.
Well,
Sometimes living in Cascadia is like living in Tumblr personified.
It can be here and there, yeah. I mean,
being in college is like Tumblr personified.
Pretty much every large city in Cascadia is a college town.
I was going to say, and Lauren, just to give you a little bit of perspective, on my drive home from work today, I heard a story on the radio about there being a yoga group exclusively for people of color in our city, and a discussion on whether or not that was okay.
Why wouldn't it be okay?
That's
I won't go.
For another day.
Yeah.
Topic for another day, but there was a lot of discussion on it, and it was very, very much like being in some of the depths of Tumblr.
All I'm saying is I am a firm believer in the right to associate with who you want to associate with.
Right.
That's my statement there.
So, bringing language back into it again, because language is going to be ever so important in any discussion like this, is I wanted to point out that when we talk about things like worth, or in a later episode we're going to do luck or whatnot, there is an implied capital letter. And that capital letter is there to differentiate it from the word as a heathen concept and the word as it is commonly used. And the reason for this, because a lot of very, very complex pieces of heathen thought that, to the, ancient heathens, as it were, would have just been an understood part of their culture, the word has continued. The word has carried through into the modern day, but the meaning has shifted. And worth is one of those things, as is luck, or any other number of things that I could think of. So I wanted to, bring it around a little bit to say that one of the reasons that we do these Beyond the Basics episodes on concepts like these is because these words are already understood by people, but they're understood in a colloquial sense, they're understood in a modern English sense, and that's not always the same. And so what we're doing here is we're adding, worth does have a definition that you can find in a dictionary, but what we're doing is adding layers of meaning to it as it would have been understood by our ancestors.
Exactly.
And this is one of those things that, unfortunately, Christianity has a leg up on us. We don't really have a school of theology, and so when we're using these words, they really are theological terms for us. And we have to deconstruct them and differentiate them from the secular, scare quotes, term, simply because there's that ease of confusion.
Well, and not only that, it comes down to these are things you have to understand, and you will continue to evolve to understand. I mean, look at me tonight. As you go through heathenry and you go through your practices, you will eventually grow and learn more and gain deeper understandings. It's just like, on the second read of We Are Our Deeds, I picked up things that I didn't pick up on the first time.
So, on that note, sorry, I was responding to a thing in the chat room. We are coming up close on 8 o'clock, and we have a lot of questions, and this is a heady topic, so we're going to take questions now. Thanks for kicking us off on that, Torin.
I'll pull out a question for us. J. Red C. Do the actions of an individual which decrease his own worth decrease the total worth of his community /tribe?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Josh to kick us off on that.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell him why he's wrong.
They don't decrease the worth of his tribe, they decrease the reputation of his tribe. His tribe may or may not have a worth to their local community. Most heathen tribes don't actually have a worth to their local community because they don't do much for that local community. But they do have a reputation. And so if an individual does something that decreases their worth, that will negatively impact the reputation of that tribe.
Well said, Josh.
Every once in a while I get something right.
See, and my thought is it's going to depend on to the community. I think you hit the nail on the head where I think it can decrease the worth. It really just depends on to whom.
Well, if your tribe is out doing something once every 2 months that is seen by the community, you're running a food bank or you're doing something that helps everybody, then you have worth.
Adopt a highway.
You've established a worth, and thus a hit to your reputation will decrease your worth to the community.
Yes.
But if your tribe isn't doing any of that, and it's just for heathens, and it's just doing stuff for those within the group, then you don't have a worth to the community. You may have a reputation within the community, but not a worth to it.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's going to be very dependent on exactly that. Do you have a worth? If you do have a worth, that worth can be harmed by the actions of one person.
All right, so Torrin, tell me how I'm wrong.
No, I already said, yeah, that was really well said. I was just going to expand upon what you said and your way of being extremely right in this one, in saying that, in this situation, for example, my tribe doesn't have any worth within the community, even though individuals within my tribe do. I know that I have a certain amount of worth within my general community, as does Chris, as does Kate. But I would say that Stone Shore probably really doesn't. The only way that I could see that being at all challenged would be depending on how you're defining community in this particular sense. Because this goes back to the interesting way that the English language decides to use itself. Are we talking about the community as in the location in which we lived and the people we're surrounded by, or are we talking about the local pagan community?
To me, it is the location we live and the people we're surrounded by, but that's totally because of the dynamics between heathens and pagans in this area. I won't lie. We are mean poopy heads because we have certain rigidity that they don't.
Hey, yeah. I would be willing to say right now that Stone Shore has a pretty decent reputation within the local pagan community.
Yeah, but y'all have done a lot to build that, even though you're super young as a group. So, hats off to you for those efforts. However, moving the conversation along.
Yeah.
If someone proves themselves not worth the protection of the Inengarth, does that make them Udengarth? That's inner yard and outer yard for those of you not using Old Norse or Icelandic or whatever the hell language that is as your language of theology.
That question from Josh 4533.
Yes. So, Lauren, does it?
I'm going to give the answer that you almost never hear from a heathen. I don't know.
Well,
I honestly don't know. I mean, sorry. I mean, that's why I have you two, because I am kind of, I'd have to ponder that one a little bit. I don't know that that's something I could just answer, just snap off.
So Torrin, go ahead.
I was going to, usually the asker goes last.
Yeah, I do what I want.
You are the boss. I was going to say, you have to break that question down. If somebody, when you say that somebody proves themselves not worth the protection of the Inengarth, of the inner yard, then they're no longer if they're not worth the protection of your tribe, then they're no longer your tribe. You're making a statement that they're no longer your tribe. You're booting them out. So, because you either protect those that are in, or you don't have them in, and that is just a simple, bald fact. It's kind of like Lauren mentioned earlier in her kindred, that they did have to get rid of somebody, and that person, went from being inner yard to outer yard.
Mhm.
So, and the same would apply in any tribe that I've ever known. If that person, if you're done with that person, then you're done with that person. They're no longer part of the inner yard.
I have to agree with the way this question is phrased specifically. If
Yeah.
they have decreased their worth to a point where they're no longer worth your protection, then they're out. That's just the way it is.
Right, and that goes back to the concept of of outlawry, more or less. In the times of 1,000 years ago, that would have been considered being outlawed. In the modern day, we don't really do that, but the individual tribe can do that, and that person is just they have lost all worth at that point.
Now, I will say this. I do want to say this just as a statement about those two particular things, that in basically to be Utengarth, as in not part of the tribe, is not necessarily, as we use it modernly, isn't necessarily calling someone, once again, bad. It's just simply saying they are not a part of this tribe. Now, it was still different back then, but from the way I've seen it used online mostly, it seems that that's just not necessarily it just is. It's not necessarily like a moral judgment, for lack of a better way to put it.
There's a difference between being outside of the folk and being outlaw. I mean, that's
I was saying in this particular case, when you're talking about somebody who was formerly inner yard,
right,
that there's really no in-between phase between being part of the tribe and being outlawed. If somebody needs to be removed from the tribe, it is of the strength with the strength of outlawry.
And
absolutely.
This is specifically, I just want to point this out because we do live in a mobile world, and sometimes you end up not being part of a tribe because you moved. This is if you have done something to damage your worth so bad as to be removed from the tribe.
Right. This is not a statement about solitary heathens.
No, this is a statement about you have screwed up so badly and done things so against the norms and morals of that tribe. And I'm saying that tribe, not, because I'm just really saying, not everyone, just that tribe, that you are no longer a part of that group and are not welcome back in that group. It's not like someone who is a member of a tribe and then, kind of agrees to part ways with someone because they're moving from Seattle to Sheboygan.
Well, yeah, there's also a difference between being cast out and being released from an oath.
Exactly.
And to bring back to the concept of worth and reputation, there are definitely some people out there or some tribes out there I can think of that a person who's been outlawed from that tribe, I would certainly be willing to entertain the idea of them joining mine. There are some tribes out there that the idea that somebody is not welcome in that tribe is a mark in their favor.
Exactly.
And that comes down to reputation.
That does.
Look, I mean, there are certain tribes who behave in ways that are completely antithetical to what me and mine believe. And so if you got booted out of there, hey, come on.
This does lead to
we'll
the
have
next
a beer with
question
you.
Here. What's the difference between someone, and I'm going to change the question here a little bit to make it flow a little better.
Okay.
What's the difference between someone repairing their worth within a community after making a mistake or doing something versus forgiving them for a mistake? We covered this a little bit, but what is the specific difference?
Who asked that question, Josh?
That was J. Red C. So, Lauren, what do you see as that specific difference between someone repairing their worth and just forgiving someone?
So let me get down into a little bit of comparative theology here. Um,
Uh-oh.
so my understanding of forgiveness is rooted in the overculture. It's rooted in Christian theology, which I have studied, raised Southern Baptist, all that. So I know my stuff a little bit here. So forgiveness, if you look at kind of both the Judaic and the Christian text, there is the idea that you are supposed to forgive someone. How many times do I forgive someone? 7 times 7. The idea being that even if somebody keeps making the same crappy mistake, you're supposed to continue to forgive them. And you're supposed to forgive them without any effort on their part. So to me, forgiveness comes from me. Forgiveness in that culture, in the overcultural sense, is I'm going to release you from the debt you have without you doing a single thing. Whereas to actually earn your worth, or it's a weird word to use, but I almost feel like it's an appropriate word here, to make reparation for what you've done. I think that is an effort from you. You're the one. If I have done something wrong, which I have, we all have. If let's say I did something to Josh, forgiveness is Josh forgiving me without me doing anything. He's just saying, no, it's fine, it's over, it's done, whatever. Me earning it back is me actually making reparations. I was at Josh's house and I got too drunk and I spilled wine all over his favorite chair. It's one thing to say it's okay, but I really should not only replace the chair or fix the chair or clean the chair or whatever it's going to take to get it back to that point before it was soiled. And probably also on top of that, buy Josh a bottle, buy Josh a 6-pack too, just for his inconvenience. But that's what it pretty much comes down to. It depends on whose part the effort is on, is the difference in the way I see it.
Well, I think reparation was absolutely the right word to differentiate those two things. So forgiveness is, I think the difference between forgiveness and the repair of worth is in whether or not it's real. Forgiveness isn't real. Forgiveness is just ignoring something that's happened, as opposed to correcting something that's happened. Especially because when you do something to damage another person in whatever way, whether it be the wine in the chair, or any crime you might commit against them, you have to repair. You've done damage to that person and their tribe. You have to do something to repair that damage. Now, that's not to say that every time you do something wrong, that is going to be a requirement. I can go over to my brother Joe's house and spill a beer on his couch, and there's no expectation of me to replace his couch or have the cushions dry cleaned or anything. He's going to look at me and he's going to say, "Oh, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it." And that's more of what we talked about in the last episode of having a store of reputation. Reputation as a currency, as it were. I don't make it a habit of spilling beer on Joe's couch. If I made a habit of spilling beer on Joe's couch, I would expect that I would have to do something about it every time it happened. But the fact that I don't do it very often, and that he knows I'm prepared to have his couch dry cleaned, makes all the difference.
I'm going to have to disagree with you about forgiveness not being real.
Okay.
I would say forgiveness may not be tangible, but I do see some merit sometimes in forgiveness when it's a situation where you know that reparation is never going to be made and it's better to forgive and just not deal with it anymore. than to just kind of like, to use more kind of concrete terms, sometimes a bank is going to forgive fees on a loan if they know somebody's going through a hardship. The idea being that forgiveness, I think, is real. It may not be as tangible in action, but to say forgiveness isn't real, that doesn't sit well with me.
I have a response, but I want to hear what Josh is going to say.
Go ahead,
I
Josh.
think you're both approaching this from an odd angle.
That's perfect answer, Josh, right there.
Forgiveness versus reparations. Forgiveness, when you forgive someone, it's not about the other person. It's about you. You are forgiving them for your peace of mind. You pretty it up with language saying that you're forgiving them because it's, divinely decreed or what have you, but it's about you. Requiring reparations, especially from a tribe member, is about the tribe, not you. So if Torin and I were members of the same tribe and Torin wronged me, he would have to make those reparations in order to repair his worth to the tribe. Not just to me. Yeah, he wronged me and he has to pay me, but his worth with the tribe was damaged. His reputation with me was damaged.
And I would even think that could even go farther than just the tribe, where you have a situation where you have a moot, you have tribes gathering, and this is one I speak from experience from, and a member of one tribe gets crazy drunk and breaks something that is on a area you're renting. That there's a situation where reparations, even if that tribe member won't do it, the rest of the tribe should step up and pay that so the other group's not stuck with it.
Well, that's a hypothetical example that you gave. I've seen played out in the real world many, many times.
Oh, I have.
Specifically, the place that we're going to be holding Cascadia Moot at. I'm part of an organization that has been using that location for over 20 years to hold events at twice a year. And every once in a while, people get drunk and stuff gets broken. But the organization has an amazing reputation with the owners of that site, because every time that has happened, we've come out and fixed it and then gone a step beyond to make it better than it was before we broke it. And which is part of the reason why we were so easily able to get a hold of this site for Cascadia Moot, is because I just went in there and they asked me, like, well, what do you know about the site? Well, I've been coming with this group for the last 20 years, and they're like, oh, okay, so you know how things work here, and we can trust you to do things. That's a function of reputation. But when it goes back to the forgiveness angle, I'm going to again go with the fact that forgiveness, as it is thought about in the overculture, is not a real thing. Forgiveness, as it is thought about, in the discussions we're having, is there is still something spent. You spend reputation to earn forgiveness, if that makes sense. Because if you have to if people are continually having to forgive you, there's going to come a point where you no longer have that stock there anymore. Let's go to the idea of Christian forgiveness. Christian forgiveness is infinite. You say you're sorry, you're forgiven, slate is wiped clean, you start over again. But forgiveness, if we want to go ahead and use that word in a heathen context, isn't so much like that. When you have to be forgiven of something, a little bit of your reputation is chipped away at. Then it has to be rebuilt. And over time, you're going to chip away too much of it, and people aren't going to forgive you anymore.
I would argue that perhaps forgiveness in the heathen term then is more closely related to forgiveness as a financial term than forgiveness as a theologic term as used by Christianity. Whereas in Christianity, you are mandated to forgive. There's you don't have to be sorry. If you do something, I have to forgive you. And that's kind of why I initially said it depends on where the actual action comes from. In forgiveness, it's me. And in I am the one, you don't even have to do anything. Whereas in the overculture, whereas with reparations, that's on you, the person who did wrong, versus the person who was done wrong. And that sounded like a country song.
Okay, so it looks like J. Red C has clarified his question a little bit to further muddy the waters for us. He says that he meant internally forgiving someone and considering a person to have regained some or all of their worth. And I'm going to continue to go ahead and beat the same dead horse that I've been beating and saying that internal forgiveness, well, I would say the internal forgiveness is actually immaterial. It doesn't matter. A debt is either paid or it's not. Now, the debt in most of these situations, we don't live in a time of the Gragas laws anymore. So the debt is largely internal in the first place. You're setting the debt yourself based on what's been wronged, unless it's something covered by law. But, I would say in this situation that internal forgiveness is immaterial. It doesn't matter. It's whether or not you consider the debt to have been paid.
Yeah, I think it's going to come, the internal forgiveness is more to me within the heathen context, there's acknowledging the debt has been paid, and then sometimes I think what maybe even I couch as forgiveness in my own personal worldview, because the majority of the people I deal with that I consider my tribe, my family, are Christian, and they're not going to make any kind of reparations for that kind of stuff. They don't think they should have to, because that's their belief and that's fine and good. Sometimes for me, it's just forgiving. So it's just letting go of it, being like, you know what, this is not going to get solved in a way that I'm going to find satisfying. So you know what, I'm just not going to deal with it anymore for my own good. Exactly, it's for me. And sometimes it is for the tribe as well. But yeah, I mean, the internal part of forgiving, that's all for you. That is all your own personal, mental health versus tribal health.
Josh?
It's a tough one. Internal forgiveness is, at least from my standpoint, unimportant. It doesn't matter if I forgive you or not. I kind of take Torin's stance here that what matters is if you've done something to make it right. For instance, if I were to pull an example from personal life, if my middle brother did something to wrong me, it doesn't matter if I forgive him. What matters is if he does something to fix it. And that speaks to his reputation to those watching and to his worth to the family, whether he does or not. Whereas my forgiveness of him doesn't really mean much.
Well, now I can say that a lot of this is going to end up going back to, how your brain works. Something that I've mentioned, briefly on the podcast time or two, and speaking of beating dead horses, a dead horse that I've been, beating for years in other forums is that you have to, over time, learn to think like a heathen. As has been said before, I was raised Christian, and so were you, because you were born in the West, and that's just all there is to it. This is the overculture is Christian dominated. You were raised Christian. I don't care what religion you were raised. And one of the things that we do have beaten into us from, kindergarten on up is, the idea of forgiving people. And forgiving people in the way it is thought of in the Christian West. And, part of the reason I've been arguing the way I have is because I don't think like that anymore on this subject. Because I have, over the course of 17 freaking years, that's one of those places where my brain has finally started to think in different ways.
And see, to me, as someone who deals with and interacts with primarily evangelical Christians who are real big on this forgiveness thing, I'm recognizing the practicality of, just because I want it to be this way and that's how I think of it, that's not how it works. Just because I would love that for my family to do something, or someone in my life who is important to me who is a Christian or follows a more Judeo-Christian ethic to make those reparations, does not mean that's what's going to happen, because that is the nature of the society that I have to function in. And so I have to make those concessions that how I want it to be and how it is aren't going to be the same. And so I've got to say, okay, you know what? For my sense of well-being, I've got to just let go of some things and say, yes, it would be great if things could go this way and it could fall in line with my own personal beliefs, but I can't hold anybody accountable to my beliefs who isn't part of my actual tribe, like heathen tribe.
Whereas, I guess, often enough, I do. For better or for worse, I could name an individual right now who has owed me a debt that I don't even think he realizes he owes me for about 10 years now. And he'll never pay it. And I understand that. However, his reputation has suffered for it.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to forgive and forget, but I'm going to just kind of go, okay, well, this is what it is, and I'm going to accept it for what it is.
Right. So my point is that forgiveness, or is that you just trying to function?
I couch it in the term forgiveness, because forgiveness to me is letting go.
I'm going to call us back here a little bit. We have gotten
okay.
way off topic.
Right.
We are talking about forgiveness and not worth.
Okay,
if you guys want to do an episode on forgiveness.
How about if I read this another question?
Go ahead.
So we have a question from Etheric, one of my favorite listeners. Wouldn't it actually be your reputation in the tribe rather than your worth that would determine how readily your judgments are accepted? If you somehow have great reputation and not great worth, wouldn't it follow that it's likely your valuation of others would still be accepted or heavily weighted?
Well, I'll tell you what, Lauren, we've been following the IRC, and I think we pretty much answered that question.
Alrighty then. Hey, I am just merely going to the next ones in line. How about... Okay, so we've gotten the forgiveness. Okay. Do certain actions add more worth to an individual than other actions? Or is it more of a proof of worth to others? And I do not have a name on that question, so... Questioner, thank you for asking that question. I'm going to let Josh go first, because we've been going first way too much.
You're right.
Yes. That's the answer. Certain actions do, in fact, add more worth. However, they are also proof of your worth to others. So, if you are the guy with the pickup truck who always shows up whenever you're called to help move something, that adds worth. But it's also proof that you have worth, because you're continually upholding that reputation. So, sorry, train of thought just gone. Yes, and Torn. Sorry.
Torn.
Well, I guess it can be, illustrated as if you've got one tribe member that whenever you need $1 for the vending machine, that tribe member's always got your back, and he will always whip out his wallet, and he will always buy you that soda from the vending machine, versus this other tribe member who, every time that you've ever had some sort of financial difficulty and you need to get your car fixed, he's busted out his wallet and dropped several $100s, or he's busted out his wallet and helped pay your rent and stuff like that. There's a difference between the vending machine guy and the I just got new head gaskets for your Subaru guy.
That is actually what I was trying to say when my brain decided it needed a reboot.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, there's you have to look at the value of the contribution that has given this person that amount of worth.
And I want to say that what that is, it's going to be the only thing I actually have to add to that is what that is going to vary tribe to tribe. What is important, what is worth the most, pun intended, is going to be variant from group to group, just like what your family finds most important is going to vary from, my family and your family. Right? That's just, to me, the guy who always has $1 to buy you a soda because you're a diabetic is going to be worth, and your blood sugar goes down, he's always got the money to, it's going to be worth just as much as the guy who dropped, $500 on your Subaru.
I wish it was only $500.
I thought Subarus were like super reliable and stuff.
They are, but there's the 2.5-liter engine always blows its head gaskets eventually. That's the one problem it has.
Well,
Gotcha.
and when Subarus break, they're not exactly the cheapest thing to fix.
Well, that's a consequence of not braking very often. But to bring us away from the woes of my poor Subaru, yes, I'm a Cascadian who owns a Subaru. You can all fuck off. There's our one.
I feel like I'm in an episode of Portlandia.
I'm not going to make the joke that just popped in my head. Moving on.
Yeah.
We get one, and we haven't had one, so.
I just used it.
Dude,
I just used it.
I just want to say we went 1 hour and 21 minutes without using it.
We did.
I feel like we almost had to.
But anyways, what I was gonna point out there is that like I said earlier about reputation being the product and worth being the value of the product. By reputation, I know that Josh will present that gallon of mead, but I don't know if it'll be worth drinking. That's the exact same thing we're just talking about here. Is that by reputation, both of those guys are the same. They're always there for you on that thing. But by worth, which one is actually worth more to you? The guy who's helping you fix your Subaru or the guy who's buying you a soda in the vending machine?
Well,
depends on the circumstance.
To bring it away from money, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we are going
The
money, but
guy
there's
who-
also many others.
Well, money is the easiest way to assign value to something. But the guy who always brings a kick-ass meal to your potluck has less intrinsic worth than the guy who always shows up with a wrench in his tool bag when your toilet breaks.
Right.
I mean, again, it's that utility thing.
Or even to say that, it is definitely, I am not a very well-off person. I'm a college student. So, to me, I have to, and it's not always about money, and I think that's something that should be reiterated, is that you can have a high worth and not have money. You can have a high worth by sweat equity, as they call it.
Well, yeah.
Getting, the friend who always shows up to help you move, especially moving bodies, has a pretty high worth.
Well, I was going to say, who's worth more to me? The guy who stepped in and helped me fix my car, or the guy who stepped in when, that guy down the road pulled a gun?
Yeah.
There's the person who has, the skills and the means to help protect my tribe.
Exactly.
It's worth a whole hell of a lot to me.
So we are down to the last 6.5 minutes of the show. If you had to give just a short 1.5-minute answer, what is worth? Torrin, go ahead. Since
Okay,
nobody else is
Torrin,
answering.
go.
All right.
1.5 at
Worth,
the long.
Yeah, I'll do my best. Worth is what your people use or what your people give you to judge you by. It's what people automatically know you by within your tribe. It's how they know what you can contribute and what you can do. Worth is the thing that gets you to where you are, and worth is the basic quality of you as a person.
Okay.
I hate your time constraints. Go ahead.
I'm going to say worth is pretty much your value to your specific tribe or family. And I think worth is very specific in that sense, that to say someone has worth or does not have worth within this circumstance doesn't necessarily mean they're like a bad person, but worth is basically the value you have by both reputation and skill to your community, however that is defined for you within your personal, religious, and family groups. I'm done.
To me, worth would be that which... Worth is your position. It's where you stand within your group, whether it's your family, your tribe, whatever you have. Worth is that position which you hold. It would almost be a class identifier. A person of high worth has more of a position than a person of low worth. And that is my 30 seconds on worth. So we have 4 minutes left. And
since I think, for the most part, we did a terrible job of trying to sum up the last hour and a half in a minute and a half each, we should probably just move on to closing the episode now.
Yeah, let's close the episode.
And on a low note.
And see, this is what happens. I come back and it all just goes to hell. Yeah.
We'll see what happens next week.
It doesn't help that I've had a headache since about 7:30 this morning.
Yeah, I took a 2.5-hour accounting test today. Y'all are lucky that I'm forming cognitive sentences. See, there you go.
I won't even talk about my day.
We have a bit of housekeeping, since we're going to be done bitching about our days now.
Yeah.
Everybody should go and like this video on YouTube. It helps us get a wider audience. You should share our videos, share our podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your pastor. I mean, if you go to church, whatever.
Your goatee, whatever.
Tell everybody about us. The more viewers we get, the more happy we are, I guess. Or the more miserable we are, depending on how many emails we get.
Go to Facebook and choose us to see this first, so you are always up to date on what's going on with Heathen Talk. Next week, I'm super excited about this. So I've been planning this Women in Heathenry Girls' Night Out. We've called it a bunch of different things, but the official name is going to be Women in Heathenry. And I have scored what I think are probably 3 of the most interesting women currently in heathenry. So I am going to have author of American Heathens, Scotty Snook. I'm going to have Danielle Sheldon, who has written extensively on women in heathenry. And I'm also going to have probably one of the women who has been in heathenry the longest, Diana Paxson. So this is going to be a really great opportunity for us to come out, listen to the show, hear about different women's experiences and perspectives. And yes, even if you're a boy, you can still ask questions. But it's going to be me and 3 awesome guests. So you really want to be here for this next week, because it's going to be something different. I'm really excited about it.
There's something I'm excited about that is down the road. Sometime in November, we will have a special guest. One of the hosts from Raven Radio will be joining us on the show to talk about heathen media and the return of Raven Radio. So, if you're interested in that, pay attention to our Facebook, our Twitter, our future episodes. Write me a letter, something, and I'll get you details down the road. Torrin, is there anything else we need to talk about or pimp in the last minute or so?
I just wanted to point out to people that Cascadia Moot is still happening, and it will be more likely to happen if people actually pre-register for it. It's going to be completely amazing for those of you that are heathens in the Pacific Northwest area, or who, like Lauren, are going to be awesome and fly out for it. It's going to be happening May 20th through the 22nd in Granite Falls, Washington. It's only $50. For that, you get your lodging on site with available campgrounds. If you prefer that, there will be fire. We are providing the food. There's a good chance, if we get enough pre-registrations, that we're providing the beer as well. So, and we're not just talking about hot dogs over a campfire here. At least one night we'll be roasting wild boar. So you can't get anything even this awesome for twice the price at most gatherings. So
Torrin,
absolutely show up.
who's making money off of this thing?
Absolutely nobody is making money off of this. The more of you guys that pre-register, the more of you guys that give us money, the more awesome stuff we're going to buy and give back to you guys. We are going to take home not a single red cent at the end of this thing. If we get last-minute pre-registrations, we will find a way that weekend to spend the money so that everything is awesome for everybody.
Booze run.
So absolutely show up.
And guys, I'm paying a lot of money to go. It's going to be amazing, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody who comes out, and you guys should come if you're going to be in Oklahoma. First or second weekend of November, I'm going to be at the Midwest Winter Moot. So that's also something coming up that's great. And you know what? You guys are all doing it wrong.
Yeah,
But you're
well,
not the boss.
you're not the boss, so
Good night, guys.
good night, everybody.